All right, welcome everybody. Can you hear me okay there?
Yeah.
Okay, welcome to Virtually Connecting at the Domains Conference, organized by Reclaim Hosting at the, what is it called? The 21C Hotel in Durham, North Carolina. I'm Terry Green. I'm here in Peterborough, Ontario, but let's hear who's there in the room, starting from your right, please.
My name is Cassie Ryan. I just finished my first year at St. Norbert College.
I'm
welcome
for the Association for Learning Technology.
I'm Adele Patton. I am from Davidson College. I'm a junior.
I'm Amy Collier. I'm Associate Provost for Digital Learning at Middlebury College.
And I'm Laura Taub, the Dean for Digital Learning at Muhlenberg College.
You skipped the pink person there.
That's Pangy the Penguin.
Well, welcome everybody. Let's we'll quickly have introductions from the virtual guests. From my view, I see Greg first. Greg, what's your name?
Well, it's Greg. I'm Greg McVary, and I'm from Southern Connecticut State University, currently in East Haddam, Connecticut.
Thank you. And I see Helen next in my list here.
Hi, I'm Helen DeWard. I'm currently in Windsor, Ontario, but I work with Lakehead University Faculty of Education.
Welcome, welcome. And Irene?
Hi, I'm Irene Stewart. I'm at St. Clair College. Today I'm in Windsor, Ontario, but we also have a campus in Chatham.
Welcome, welcome. And Rebecca?
All right, figured out how to take the mute off. I'm Rebecca Oak. I'm a co-founder of Virtually Connecting, actually, and I live in Sunnyvale, California, and I teach at UMass Boston in instructional design.
Welcome. And can the people hiding behind the laptop in person there tell us who's there?
Hi, I'm Joe Murphy. I'm the director of the Center for Innovative Pedagogy at Kenyon College, and I'm our on-site buddy for this session. And over there taking pictures. Oh,
I'm his kid.
Oh, hi. That's awesome.
That is our first Virtually Connecting intern.
Awesome.
It's amazing.
Welcome.
I'm young, you know. It's Autumn. I'm a co-director of Virtually Connecting. I'm an instructional designer at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. I'm taking pictures and tweeting. So.
Awesome. Welcome. Thanks, everybody. I was thinking maybe you could start by a round of what brought you to Domains. What probably have a finite amount of things you can choose to go to. Why'd you come to Domains? Anyone?
I was at Domains 2017 and really found that experience to be just energizing and really motivating for the work that my campus is doing around Domains. So coming back to the conference in 2019, it just made a ton of sense, and happy to come with some new colleagues who didn't come to 2017 and get to experience it a little bit through their new perspective as well.
That's great.
Right?
Yeah.
I'll jump in
I was
there.
like, I'm here.
So back in, I think it was November last year, I had a conversation with Jim Gruen, and I was able to describe to him all the creepy things that I could do with facial technology recognition and surveillance, and so he invited me to come and spread the word.
Have you done that yet, or is that tomorrow?
I'll be talking tomorrow morning. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And I think we were going to do a Domains and Virtually Connecting teaser because you've got something up your sleeve.
Yes.
I caught it on Twitter.
Well, we do some screen sharing. I can show you something. I think it's going to tickle Jim Gruen, but he hasn't seen yet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Type in the URL and share.
Ooh.
This is
exciting. Don't tell Jim.
We won't tell Jim.
No, I'm not tweeting to him right
We
now.
are Twitter silent.
Hold on, I'm just typing, and hopefully this works. Otherwise, part of my talk isn't going to be a very silent moment. So here we go. It seems to be working. So I'm just going to share our screen here. So this is the premiere of Domain Invaders.
Oh.
So, right, fingers crossed this works. So I'm going to take a picture. And nothing happens. I think I might be having to do some work tonight to fix this.
It is also possible that I've got privacy settings or privacy.
Let me just try.
Hangouts eats up a lot of bandwidth too.
Let me try that again. So, yeah, I've got some work to do tonight.
Well, it doesn't have to work on my laptop. So.
This is part of the teaser.
Yeah.
That's right. We're still teased.
This is when you demo from your local dev environment and just don't tell anybody.
What I'm going to do is everyone's going to continue talking, and I'm going to see if I can get it working on my laptop. And then we're not going to show you on Reconnecting what happens, but we can go by the reaction of people here.
Yeah, our reaction, and you'll all be like, oh my god.
I'm here for the reactions.
Okay.
I would love to hear from the two students because it's such a treat to have students here and to hear both why they're here and what they kind of hope to get out of this experience.
You stole my question. That's what I was going to say.
I'm here from Davidson College, and Davidson has been using domains for 5 years now. I've been there for 2. And so I've been making my own subdomains, and now I'm about to revamp my main domain. But I'm here to basically talk about the student experience and what we can do better. I'm a media consultant, so my plan is to really hone in on how students can use domains to the fullest extent that they should. And then I'm here from St. Norbert, and St. Norbert started using domains. They really started pushing it at the beginning of last year. So I just presented on the student experience and what it means to students to have a domain and how they're trying to implement it in the classroom.
That's fabulous. Were you sold on domains right from the get-go, or did it take a while?
I am, because I did FBLA and different things in high school, and I had a lot of domain experience and I loved it. I was actually hired to work for a program called Full Spectrum Learning, and my main goal was to make a website for them. And then through that, I actually learned about personal domains. So I kind of did it backwards.
Awesome.
The full spectrum site is beautiful. It's
Thank
really,
you.
really well done.
What's the, how do you find it? Full spectrum?
It's fullspectrumlearning.night.domains.
Okay,
Like
cool.
in shining armor.
Night with a K.
Night with a K.
So in terms of other students and words of wisdom that other students can take from your experiences, what gets you into this domain of your own? Like, why do it as a student? What's in it for them, for you? What's in it for the students?
So I actually realized this about a week ago. I've been using domains and making subdomains, and I was wondering, if I have all these subdomains, like I have a subdomain for my art portfolio, what do I use my main domain for? And so I think students should recognize that and make a, like an ultimate resume main domain, which is my plan, and just have that fluid and keep updating it as you enter the workforce. And I think it's a really great tool for future employers to look at, for family, for friends, just to keep them updated and just share your interests and your work.
Mine is really a personal blog right now because I'm only 1 year into college. So for me right now, it doesn't pay to have it be a professional site because I'm not really looking for a job. But I definitely want to expand it later on because I do want to do website design and like domain work for the rest of my life. So it's going to be crucial for me to have a domain when I'm looking for a job.
Thank you. I actually had one student this year who reached out and started her own domain. So it was really interesting to see from her perspective what pushed her into actually taking that next step into claiming her name on the web. So it's interesting to hear from your perspectives too. And that you're both presenting at the conference is quite a coup, I think.
How much would you say that, how much time did you have to invest into learning how to learn? I actually take that from Rebecca when she's talking about, the onboarding of folks into like their own web design. Like we're talking instructional design, but it's totally different when you're just said, oh, here's your space, now go learn. Talk about that a little bit. I mean, if you want to talk about it. We also want to like just throw everything on the two student guests, but I'm intrigued to hear that kind of ideas.
I think it's really advantageous to have an experimental attitude, when you're trying to design a domain or a subdomain. And I guess there's a little bit of a learning curve, but that's expected across all new platforms that you might encounter. But for me, it was pretty easy to learn and personalize.
So in high school, I used Dreamweaver for everything, and then coming to college, I transferred to WordPress. So it's definitely a bit of a learning curve, but at St. Norbert, we have a tech bar where like students can help you with all of your digital skills. So a lot of the students and faculty made the learning curve really easy, and they were supporting me throughout it. And I still have random WordPress questions, and they are always there to help me.
I think
Helen,
but sorry, just really briefly that at Middlebury, when we've talked to students about the value of their domains as they've been exploring, one of the things that I've heard, and I may or may not reflect experiences of the students here, is that you go through these different semesters and years of college, and you transition between classes that may or may not be interrelated in any kind of way. And that for them, their domain provided kind of a consistent grounding space for reflection, for dumping things. Sometimes it was like, I'm just going to take the stuff that I got, that I did this semester, and just dump it there. Don't think about it later, but just that kind of place that you can use to kind of come back to. It's almost like a home, right? It is your home space in some ways. And I think for a lot of our students, that resonated with the idea that someday I might need to use this for professional purposes or for something maybe a little bit more practical. But right now, it's a space that kind of helps me draw the threads together to weave things in ways that maybe I don't get to in other classes.
Even in my first year, I already like last week I went through and read like my very first blog post from like when I moved in and like the transition from I just did a end of my first year with like the reflections and the different things I've learned and the different activities at the end of the year, and even the growth in just that 1 year, and forgetting about what even happened first semester, which seems so weird because it was only 9 months ago. But move-in week, I completely basically forgot about it, and just remembering that it was a really cool experience. And
Can you blog about that? So I can share that with my students when they start complaining, or I need support. I shouldn't have said the word complaining. That's my fault. But that's the joy I want to grab. So if you write that blog post, please ping me because I want to share that story.
Were you saying that you already wrote that blog post?
I kind of wrote one that's a wrap up to my first year. But it's more of like just what I did in my first year, not like what I've learned. I'll probably do that one at the end of summer because I'm doing a lot of different summer projects that I'm excited about. Because when I'm not in the classroom, I have time to actually like sit down and like sit in my room and just like try to figure out a problem that I've been having. So that's a cool experience I've been having the past couple weeks of summer.
That's great. Before we went live, Helen, you were asking Laura about something. Do you want to
Sure.
revisit that?
Yeah, sure. So I caught some tweets from your presentation today, and it just caught my attention when you used a quote, really prophetic, I think, in terms of you're talking about domains and connecting it to knitting. And I just wanted to talk to you about how that whole thing evolved and that lovely word that you used.
Well, when I was at Domains 2017, I actually was here knitting little tiny pink hats because one of the presentations that my colleague and I gave was on a Domains project that students did around archives, activism, and the Women's March. So knitting has always been a little bit, I'm just gonna keep coming back to Domains conferences and try to weave knitting into all of it. But actually 2 articles came out within the last 2 weeks about knitting and coding, knitting as an algorithmic practice. And I've been saying that to my kids forever. And I really believe it and think that there's a lot of really important historical research that fuses knitting to these computational practices. So I think about that a lot. My domain is called Where Warp Meets Weft, and that's a
yes,
metaphor.
yeah.
And so how does that connect to the title of our talk? Well, the title of the talk that my Muhlenberg colleagues and I gave today was called Against Indifference or Against Complacency. I can't remember which one it was, but the real thing that mattered was domains and the slow fuse of possibility. And the slow fuse of possibility is a quote from Emily Dickinson. Every time I'm in a domain space, for really important, obvious reasons, people talk about Virginia Woolf and quote A Room of One's Own. And Martha gave a memorable keynote in 2017 around unpacking Virginia Woolf's argument for a domain of one's own. So I'm not going to tread in that water because people have really covered, I mean, brilliant folks have brilliant women from Virginia Woolf to Martha Burtis and Audrey Waters, their sisterhood, and Mahabali and others. It's a sisterhood around Virginia Woolf and domain of one's own. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just add to the conversation Emily Dickinson and this idea of imagination being that spark that lights our ability to imagine other worlds are possible. And that just seemed to me to capture what students on my campus are doing and faculty with domain of one's own, using it as a space to imagine other ways of being a learner, other ways of being online, other ways of doing the activity of teaching and learning. So it all kind of came together, and so, but I wasn't happy. I wasn't totally happy with the imagery that was coming to mind around a fuse. It's a lot of cherry bombs and dynamite sticks. Very destructive, and of course, you know, Martha Burtis always says a big part of domains is breaking things, but the blowing of things up wasn't working for me. So a little research on the word fuse leads in the end to an Old English word that is to knit. So to fuse is also to knit. So that's how it holds together.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a wonderful story.
Thank you for indulging my metaphor. Like nobody else cares about that but me. So
I think metaphorically, and this just rang true for me. So thank you for sharing that.
That's awesome.
Etymology is just fun, and that's what happens when you put a bunch of teachers together. Like, oh, let's just go play with etymologies of words and metaphors.
Yeah.
And then blog about it because we have domains.
So I actually have a question for you guys, for everybody in the room, really, is how do you... Sorry, am I muted? No. Okay.
No, you're okay. But
how do you encourage students to authentically blog rather than, you know, write a blog post on this? Like, and I try to leave my topics open. but I still want to sort of like facilitate that encouragement without having it too yeah. So I'm wondering what you guys do. Prescriptive.
Well, Rebecca, I'll just throw out there that one of the really encouraging things we've heard about in a couple panels today is, you know, work that students are doing outside of classes, outside of assignments, a real interest in using domains on their own terms for their own interests, professional, personal. So that's been encouraging.
Sunday at Davidson has some data to back up what you're saying, that the students have found, you know, have used it for curricular purposes, have used blogging and blog platforms for that purpose, but do seem to really want that piece of using it for their own purposes, their own voice, their own rationale and goals. And that reflects what we found at Middlebury as well, that in large part the curricular uses, believe it or not, some of the students have actually said to us, we kind of don't want our professors to use this in our classes. All the fun out of it, and they often don't know what they're doing. Which we can work on that. That's not an end of the road kind of thing. But I think when it comes to curricular versus non-curricular, sometimes that can be when it can be done within curriculum in some ways that get students really excited about it. But I think that takes time. I think it takes time to kind of craft that, turn it into something. I don't think right off the bat that you've got it, right? So I think it is something you have to get feedback from students and work with them on getting to develop.
I'm wondering about the student. Yeah, let's.
Going off of that, I think part of the reason, at least Davidson students, from what I've seen, don't really use their domains for personal reasons. It's maybe because of, you know, in-class assignments, and so they think, well, it's for school and nothing else. But it, you know, that's part of why I'm here and wanting to expand their understanding of what can actually be done on domain.
Okay, so I have never had to blog for a class, so I don't really know what that's like. I haven't, it's gonna sound weird because I'm a computer science major, but my classes are very low tech. The only tech that we use is like labs of actual programs, but all of our classes are lecture on the board, very low tech. So the whole point of full spectrum learning is trying to increase technology and engagement. So that's a project that I'm hoping in later years I'll be able to probably expand upon. I will say that I'm not forced to blog for full spectrum learning, but I'm very highly encouraged. And I will say it's less fun because I am so highly encouraged. It's so much more fun to like once every 2 months blog on my main domain. But if something fun is happening, I'll blog like every week. It goes in waves because that's how my life goes. And I think that's what makes it so fun, is it's really about my life and it's the archives of my life, not I have to blog now because I haven't blogged in a week.
That's an interesting insight, that the timing of the things that you're learning and the things in your life that make you want to write about it are not the same thing as our deadlines on our classes, right? It's not kind of forced, now you must reflect kind of thing. It's like that might be part of it too. I hadn't really connected that. That's really exciting.
Yeah, and during the school year, it's so fast. We don't really have time to reflect on the work we're doing, actually bigger picture. So having the opportunity to write and reflect about that during the summer or on breaks is really good.
I remember my own personal journey was, it took me a long time to find my own voice when blogging. It's like, when I started off, it was very much about disseminating information of a very particular type. And the idea of finding my voice actually took me a long time. But more recently, I've been blogging with my boss, and we do it. Each month we write a blog post together. It's a collaborative post. And so we take it in terms to basically have a conversation within the post. So she'll start off with a paragraph, and I'll respond to that. And so we do that every month. And it's actually really nice to actually have that kind of oh, it's coming towards the end of the month, let's start thinking about what we're writing about. And also because it's asynchronous, we're kind of having time to reflect on what each other are saying and then having some more. So I think in some ways it feels, there is some kind of a degree of, it's not artificial, but you know, you're definitely not saying revealing all, because we're talking about the internal practices within our organization. So when we're mentioning colleagues, we don't mention anything private or personal about them. So there's a degree of, kind of constraining what you're saying, but because we're doing this asynchronously, we're having conversations by Hangouts about, you wrote about this, and so it's a really rich experience, and it's nice to actually do that collaboratively with someone, because then you kind of build on their energy. They're writing something, so it's worked out well.
Really cool idea.
We've been doing it for over a year now.
I like reading them. I can't lie. They're open. I read them all the time. So it's a model too. You're modeling open practices for ALT, which is, I think that's what we need to do as teachers, is like, well, try to show your students how blogging fits in your workflow mainly. And then what I did, Rebecca, is I gave 2 posts a week, and one of them is on whatever you want. Now, people are terrified of the blank page at the same time, so they can also use that and say, you're working up to a final project. So I kind of divided my semester in half. Like the first half is just to learn what it means to put yourself out there and build up your website. And then the second half, you can either pick a Better Yourself or Better the World project. And then if you want, because never blame a college student for picking the path of least resistance. Like my kids are they're on the edge of survival, many of them. So it's totally acceptable to say I'm only doing the things that I barely have to do to get by. And to really get them to push into learning from their own perspective, I got to kind of give them the space, and then also respect that they can't, just getting the bare minimum done is often a survival technique for college students. And so that's really worked though. And I posted in the chat and on Twitter some of the reflections from my students. I did have to throw out my syllabus in the middle of class, which is we're so judged by and controlled by our syllabi. But that's kind of what I've done, is that free space thing. And it works a little bit, but I'm always asking you, because I never know the answers to any of these things. And it's so hard because at the master's levels, or am I doing this the very first time I've ever been online? And I'm using WordPress.com with those students too. They don't even have to do with the whole domains infrastructure yet. So it's hard. That's what I try to remember, is nobody started with a domain first. Everybody started on some kind of, whether it was, if you're going way back to TypePad, or if you're just saying Facebook or MySpace, we all started on some kind of scaffolded platform. Very rarely will you find a person whose very first web presence was just the web.
I say I'm throwing my students into domains first week.
Yeah.
But, again, my students are grad students, and most of them are mid-career professionals. And so a lot of them actually haven't had that, that they're working, but they haven't had that experience of being on the web in other ways. And then some of them have. So I actually have a really interesting mixed bag of students that can learn from each other, which I think is exciting. So I don't have to teach them. But my students, are doing their own domains. And interestingly, in the, and it's an e-portfolio course. So largely the course is about creating an e-portfolio. But it's interesting trying to, I want them to write blog posts, but I also don't want to dictate what those posts are, but I want to give them ideas all at the same time.
I saw the penguins tapping their watch there at the. They're saying it's time we better wrap up. Let the on-site folks go to the whatever's next, maybe a social event or something. I don't know. But we want to say thank you so much for your time, everyone there. We really appreciate it. That was a fun chat. I'll stop the broadcast soon, but anybody on virtual can stay and chat a little longer if we want. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And for the student voices, and we appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us.
And familiar faces.
Another session
like
tomorrow at
interning
12:30 if anyone's
that's
interested.
the life of the intern. They can never get any of the credit.
Bye, guys.
Bye.